Thanks so much, Senator Daschle. I was saying that I should just drop the mic and leave after that introduction. It's great to be here. I was invited today to talk about how a progressive governor gets reelected in a place where Hillary Clinton got 36% of the vote. And it is really great to be with you today because by all accounts, I shouldn't be here. 2016 was the year of the outsider. That wasn't me. I was Attorney General and I was governor. The guy I ran against shattered spending records in Montana with his own personal wealth. More ads were run in Montana than any governor's race in the nation. If this was the year of hate, fear, and discontent, my opponent peddled it, but I refused to. I ran positive ads, offering voters an optimistic vision for the future. And at the end of the day, Donald Trump won by 20 points. I won by 4. Focusing, though, on how I won misses something. Because what ought to be equally important is how a progressive Democrat governs in a state where Donald Trump could win by 20 points. Best political advice I ever received, it actually came from a Republican. He said to me, you run to win, but you win to run. To run government, the goal isn't to win the election. It's to positively and meaningfully impact individuals and families, no matter where they live and no matter whether they supported us. The goal is to fight so that that next generation, our kids and our grandkids, have every opportunity we had and even more. So how did I win? And more important, how do I govern? First and foremost, it's about showing up. As a Democrat, I don't have the luxury, as a Democrat in Montana, of spending the day talking only to people who agree with me. I spend days in places where, at first blush, Democrats are as rare as a tweetless Twitter feed from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in the early morning hours. Here's what I say, or what I mean, though, when I say show up. By 2015, 30 states had expanded Medicaid. In Montana, the word Obamacare was about as popular as a word like root canal. My legislature is 2/3 Republican controlled, yet it was important for Montana to ultimately get Medicaid passed. I'll never forget, I went to a community meeting at a hospital. It was in a town called Shoto, population 1,700. I could look throughout that whole community and there weren't a heck of a lot of Bullock supporters there for sure. The ranchers gathered. They knew what I'd come to talk about because Americans for Prosperity was kind enough in the weeks before I came to actually bombard their telephones, fill their mailboxes, talking about the fact that I was going to come up and visit. Now, I have no doubt that a whole heck of a lot of you don't know what it's like to have AFP go after you, but it's a fairly common occurrence in a place like Montana. Yet I showed up anyway. And by the end of that meeting, they acknowledged that 40% of the people that walked through those hospital doors didn't have health insurance. They recognized that if they lost that rural hospital, that community was soon to follow. They saw past the rhetoric and understood that not only could expansion improve the health of their friends and their neighbors, but at the end of the day, it would save that rural hospital, which also saves that rural community. Their support and then that visit gave their local Republican legislator the confidence to defy her party leadership, to defy the Koch brothers, and actually support the measure. And every vote mattered. Every single vote mattered. Because of towns like Shoto, we are the only state since 2014 to get Medicaid expansion through a state legislature. And not only has a lifeline been thrown to our rural health care system, not only has our unemployment, our uninsurance rate gone from 20% in 2013 to 7% last year. But 77,000 more Montanans who previously couldn't afford to see a doctor now have health care. I understand that man on the street stories are really only that. But it's profound to have people stop you on the sidewalk and tell you that your actions saved their life. Let me be the first to say that just showing up isn't always enough. I went to other communities where I failed, many communities where I failed. But you have to try. I shoot for 100% with the hope of getting 51%. And you do that in running for office, and you do that in governing. As a national party, Democrats don't seem to focus on this anymore. Think about those Rust Belt states that we lost in 2016. The strategy was all about using data to find people who already agreed with us so we could drag them to the polls on election day. There was little attention paid to places that might be difficult to win. There's little... You must be from South Dakota. No, and there's really little talk from my perspective about trying to persuade people, about really offering voters that reason to vote for a Democrat for president. If that was my strategy in Montana, what we followed nationally, I would have been kicked out a long time ago. From my perspective, Democrats need to do a better job of showing up, making an argument, even in places where people are likely to disagree. It's good for campaigning. It's good for governing. It'd be good for our democracy, and it'll be good for our Democratic Party. We also can't assume that the values of people, even those who we disagree with or didn't vote for us, are all that different than the values that we as Democrats are consistently fighting for. We saw this assumption, from my perspective, in 2016 when the party wrote off areas of the map. It's silly and it's actually dangerous. The values of most Americans aren't partisan. Folks are too busy trying to support their families and put food on the table. Most Americans value and want the same thing: a safe community, a roof over their heads, good public schools, clean air and clean water, a decent job, and the unwavering belief that they can build a better future for their kids and their grandkids. And I fundamentally believe this is true, whether you live in Manhattan, New York, Manhattan, Kansas, or even Manhattan, Montana. I fought for these values and the public policy that delivers them. Public education, protection of our public lands, an economy that works for everyone, and fair taxes. And it translated into people knowing that I was looking out for them. And then what that translates into is the ability to fight and govern and work on areas like equal pay for equal work. Translates to signing one of the most far-reaching executive orders for protecting our LGBT community. Translated into record investments in public education. Translated into the first time ever investments in public preschool. Translates into never once compromising on women's reproductive freedoms. And it translated just last month, when our legislature left, into not only criminal justice reform measures, but passing an earned income tax credit, something that we've been working on for 15 years in Montana. The bottom line is that when we do it right, fighting for our shared values, fighting for those great equalizers of opportunity, and fighting for the public good, we'll always beat out somebody fighting for their narrow self-interest. Finally, I want to leave you with a radical idea, and here it is. If you're going to talk about doing something, then actually try to do it. Think about that. It's Montana simple, I guess. If you're going to talk about doing something, then actually try to do it. For an example, I imagine dang near everybody in this room would agree that our campaign finance system is broken. I was Attorney General when the U.S. Supreme Court took up Citizens United. Montana wrote the amicus brief in opposition. We got a majority of states to join us, including a good handful of Republican-led states. When the court opened up the spending floodgates, I defended a law called the Corrupt Practices Act of 1912 in Montana. In Montana, for 100 years, we had a prohibition against corporate spending or contributions in our elections. And unlike what happened in Citizens United, I actually built a factual record. I got testimony from Democrats and Republicans talking about the corruptive and corrupting influence of independent expenditures. In a decision that's unfortunately forever captioned American Traditions Partnership versus Bullock, the U.S. Supreme Court summarily disposed of our 100-year-old law in a 5-4 decision. 5-4 decision, it was the first significant case after Citizens United. Yet as governor then, I didn't give up. I took a different tack. I worked with Democrats and Republicans. Again, my legislature is almost 2/3 Republican. I have to do that. But I worked with them to pass one of the most progressive disclosure laws in the country. So the dark money groups, no matter what part of the federal tax code that they try to hide behind, if they're going to spend or contribute in our elections, our state elections, they have to disclose their spending and who's giving them money. Now, it took a number of different attempts to get there, to get that passed, but as a result, even the Koch brothers stayed out of our election cycle for state elections last November. Now, Democrats didn't fix Citizens United when we had control of Congress and the White House. And reform movements more and more are working around Washington, not with it. Washington has become a place where talking is often a substitute for doing. It's a place where folks outside the Beltway often think that politicians complain about problems not to solve them, but so they can raise money or get more followers on social media. I think that's a very, very cynical view or approach to politics and government, and it's bad for democracy. I think it accounts for much of the distrust of the federal government. Yet, I also think it's fixable. I believe that the good news is that Democrats can stand up for our values and the values of Main Street, mainstream America, and that we can win. You have to believe that we share values, and you have to fight for them. You have to fight for the public good. You have to do things, not just talk about them, and you have to show up. Thank you for having me today, but more important, thank you for all being here today. You want questions? Oh, is that right? You name it, whatever you want.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Governor. I think he has time for one, possibly two questions. We've got microphones. We've got a question right up here. If you just wait for the microphone, fantastic. Thanks.
You got it.
Hello. Nina Beatty. Can you talk a little bit about the special election for Congress and Rob Quist?
Yeah.
And whether or not everybody in this room should send him some money?
That I cannot say. I was told what I'm not allowed to say. So we actually have a special election May 25th against a guy named Greg Gianforte who ran against me, who spent $6 million of his own and lost. Well, I guess again, I guess I wouldn't be here were it otherwise. And against a gentleman named Rob Quist, and Rob Quist was new to politics. So our one congressperson in his 147,000 square mile state, we only have one, but he became the Secretary of Interior. Rob Quist is a lifelong Montana, raised in a town called Cut Bank. Actually went through some medical issues, so he knows when we're talking about issues like repeal of the Affordable Care Act, how it can devastate individuals and families. I appreciate the question because it's not unlike when I was running or others. People want to view, well, that's a heck of a long way away, and there's no way that a Democrat can win. On the march, Women's March, 10,000 people showed up at our state capitol. I don't think you'd have 10,000 people show up if you canceled hunting season. So there's excitement and there's energy, and it's well worth following. The special election is May 25th.
And I can say that I think everybody.
There's latitude in the audience that apparently I don't have. Am I done? Thank you again very much.